Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson, and I am a yoga and meditation teacher, kirtan artist, sound healer, ordained minister, and certified Kilabi inquiry facilitator. Today, I'd like to discuss or talk about failure and how I think you want to think about failure. Now, there might be another word for this phenomenon, but I think failure is a good word to use. In reality, failure is how human beings learn. I'm going to repeat that. Failure is how human beings learn. Okay? Now, the trouble for us is in the modern setting, most of us are led to believe that answers are given to us by others, and we learn those answers, we memorize those answers, and then we regurgitate those answers, and that in our culture is considered learning. And if we can regurgitate the answers properly, then we don't fail. We've not failed. But this maybe works in a limited number of settings and activities. And I'm not even sure, I don't know if studies have been done, but I'm not even sure that this approach is ideal in any situation. So again, most of us think that, for instance, if I want to learn the piano, that the way to learn the piano is to watch a video or hire a teacher, and they tell you, put your finger here, do this, put your finger there, do that, put your finger there, do this, put your finger there, and do that. And then you just hear this information, and then you can automatically repeat what they're telling you to do, and then you have not failed. However, the reality is, if you've ever tried to learn an instrument, is you will fail. You will fail much more than you succeed if you are ever going to be proficient at an instrument, at least in the beginning. At least in the beginning. So this is what people don't see. They see someone who is playing an instrument and it seems so effortless. And they think, oh, I tried playing the guitar and I was no good at it. But the truth is that the person who is displaying that talent, they likely overcame many obstacles. They overcame a lot of evidence, a lot of failure to get to that point where they were proficient. So what does this have to do with spirituality, with yoga? Well, the way I would paraphrase what I encourage people to do is fail often, but never give up. Now, why do I say fail often? The reason I use that languaging is because, again, most of us think if I try and do crow pose and I am unable to do the crow pose, then I have failed. That's the attitude, the way most of us have been taught to think of what's happening. Teacher said do this. I tried to do what the teacher said in the yoga class, and I wasn't able to do it, so therefore I failed. So I'm just embracing that language. Okay, you failed. So then what I'm encouraging you to do is fail often. And what this does is every time you quote unquote fail, every time you try to do something and you're unable to do it, you might not realize this, but what is happening is you're changed by the experience in several different ways. So your body creates adaptations. If we're talking about a physical activity, okay? Even a mental activity, your brain will change. But let's just say crow pose. In yoga, you're trying to do crow pose. You try. That effort is creating changes, physiological changes in your body that you're probably not going to consciously register. As I've said in my previous talk, the conscious mind is not that aware. It's not that sensitive. It takes a lot before something registers consciously. And we just need to be consciously aware of that. That a lot of things we do that are benefiting us, that seem like they're having no effect, actually are having an effect, a small effect. But over time, those effects are compounded. And this is, again, a great example of this is learning a musical instrument. No one goes from 0 to brilliant overnight on a musical instrument. Everybody needs to train their muscles, the muscle memory, and then also changes will happen in their brain as well. And this is without exception. Even extremely talented people that are able to learn very, very quickly, seemingly effortlessly, these people also go through the same process. So even though it might seem like someone is a prodigy, and they might be, I'm not saying everyone is equally gifted in this regard, but this is true in yoga as well. Certain people may have a certain physique. They might be younger or stronger or more flexible just naturally at the gate. But again, this is why I would say what my teacher said about Zen. He said, Zen has to be different. And so it is with yoga. Yoga, we have to think of it differently. So if we're thinking in terms of a performative, I need to succeed, I need to do this posture, we're thinking that there's some magical benefit in being able to do the posture. And I can assure you, there isn't. There isn't. Most of the benefit you're getting is in making the effort to do the posture. So in a sense, by the time you already can do the posture, a lot of the benefit is gone. Should you still do the posture when you already can? Sure, because that's called maintenance. If you never do the postures, then eventually one day you'll probably try and you won't be able to. This is like practicing an instrument, right? Playing a piece of music you already know how to play, just to maintain your ability to play it. Because if you never play it, then one day you might find that when you try, you're no longer able to. So for many of us, this is a real shift in the way that we think. So again, fail often, make mistakes, and what you may not appreciate is that you are learning from those mistakes, at least physiologically, in terms of your body. Okay? If you're practicing in a yoga class the way I'm encouraging, then every time you attempt to do something and you're unable to do it, you are creating changes, physiological changes. And as long as the next attempt using those muscles and flexibility and strength is not too far out, right? This relates with what I talked about in my last talk about dosing. So if it's months or years later, then the beneficial effects of your first attempt are long gone. So this is why I say fail often, right? We don't want to try something once and then 3 years later try again, because it's likely that whatever adaptations were made are now completely gone. They've disappeared. So this is the idea behind failing often. We want to, quote unquote, fail, do something that we cannot yet do. That's another way of thinking of it. Do something you cannot yet do. Practice. This is really what I'm describing, is the process of practicing something. And as I think most of you know, is called a yoga practice. So sometimes in class I say it's called a yoga practice, not a yoga perfect, right? Because that's what many of us are coming to class trying to be, is perfect. We are dressed in our sexiest workout clothes. We are trying to look good in class and do exactly what the teacher says perfectly. And again, I would say yoga has to be different. You need to think of this differently. You need to come to class with an idea of actually finding things that you cannot do well or easily and being willing to do that. It's not saying that if you can do everything in class that there's no benefit. Of course there is. But the person who's probably getting the most benefit is the person who can do the least amount in the class. I'm going to repeat that because a lot of people, again, they're thinking in the wrong way. If they go to a class and they're not able to do everything or even many things, they assume that, okay, this is not the class for me. While you do need to be careful, you don't want to overextend yourself, you don't want to push too hard. That is something, at least in my classes, you can regulate for yourself. So, in theory, you could come to class, and if you're only able to do 3 things in that class, and the rest of the time you're in child pose, in theory, those 3 things can benefit you quite a bit. And every attempt you make at doing something else is also benefiting you. So again, there's nothing wrong with going to a class where you can do everything well. But a class like that should be thought of, again, mostly as maintenance. And you want to think about maintenance versus growth. As human beings, in my experience, the only way we are really truly happy and fulfilled is if there is some level of growth. Now, growth doesn't have to always be more of something. This is, I think, a mistake that many people make, is they think, well, I could bench press this, now I need to bench press that, okay? I was this flexible, now I need to be that flexible. I would encourage you not to think in such linear terms. Rather, learning something new is a way that we can grow. So instead of always pushing for more and more and more, which is not possible, by the way, the human body, as adaptable as it is, eventually there will be an upper limit to what we can do, or at the very least what we can do in a healthy way. So again, if I'm pursuing an insane amount of flexibility, at a certain point I might find that I'm actually beginning to damage my joints in pursuit of more flexibility. And I actually personally know of a few rather well-known yoga teachers who've actually done this. So I don't really recommend it. Even if you can push yourself and find yourself doing contortions and really crazy flexibility things, the question has to be, is this really safe over a lifetime, over the long term? Now, I will say this, that in modern America, many of us lack a healthy amount of flexibility. So, some of you coming to, say, my yoga class might see some things that we are doing as actually extreme, or, oh, wow, that's a lot of flexibility. Generally, in my classes, we aren't doing anything that extreme. I'm quite average when it comes to my flexibility. If I have above average flexibility for Americans, it's because Americans have a lower flexibility than they really should to be healthy. So again, for me, none of this should be about becoming extraordinary, because that tends to feed the ego. If we do something extraordinary, it's coming not from chasing after flexibility or strength or anything like that. It's coming from an expression of love, and it's a very different feel. So a great example of what I'm speaking about are babies. If you've ever had a baby or child and you watched the child learning to walk, how did the child actually learn to walk? Did you explain to the child, hey, first put your feet on the ground, then stand up, then put one foot in front of the other? Even if you did, it didn't help, did it? No, what needed to happen was the baby needed to fail a lot. I'm going to repeat that because, again, it's very important. The baby had to fail at walking a lot before she learned to walk. Now, as much as we'd like to believe as adults that we can hear something one time from a teacher, write it down in our notes, and then have integrated that information and can use that information. Here's how you do crow pose. Put your hands here. Put your legs there. Do this. We would love to believe that that's how we learn to do crow pose. In my experience of teaching crow pose for a very, very long time, that's not how people actually learn to do crow pose. People actually learn to do crow pose by doing a balanced practice. So they're working on their strength, they're working on their flexibility, they're working on fear that might arise, they're working on staying calm and focused, they're strengthening their core, and then by repeatedly attempting to do crow pose, over time, the body adapts, and one day, perhaps with no warning or no fanfare, they attempt it and they're able to do it all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, right? Of course, it wasn't out of nowhere. It came after a lot of practice. So this is something that I see in classes a lot. People they will say things like, well, I tried that pose before and I wasn't able to do it. Or I've tried many times, I wasn't able to do it. Again, I'm not able to do it shows that the person doesn't really understand the value in trying to do it. Even if you never do crow pose or side crow or any of the other postures that I teach as peak postures, you can still get benefits by trying. So fail often, but never give up. Fail often, but never give up. There was somebody I was listening to the other day, and they said, if you try and do something and you fail, that's failure. But if you get back up and you try again, you are not defeated. And I like this because this is getting to the same point or idea. I'm not a failure if I haven't stopped trying. It's when I stop trying that I really am a failure, right? A failed attempt at something doesn't make me a failure until I decide I just cannot do that thing. I'm going to stop trying to do that thing. So it's mental, but our mental attitude and approach affects everything. And this is why I'm giving this talk today, because most of us have learned at a very young age to approach learning in what I would consider a very ineffective way, which again is the sort of school model of teacher tells me this, I listen to the teacher, I take notes, and then on the test, I regurgitate what was said. I spit it back out. and I get an A. I don't fail if I'm able to regurgitate this information. However, with many things in life, maybe even most things in life, this approach is not ideal and may not even work. And yoga, learning yoga postures, being able to do yoga postures, learning an instrument, learning to sing, many things in life, learning to be in a long-term loving relationship, right? These are all things that we will want to be open to failing and then learning from those failures, from those mistakes. Another way of putting it is say, make mistakes often. What happens if we aren't open to this? It's very interesting psychologically. What happens is we begin to deny the failure. So again, let's take a loving, lasting relationship. I make a mistake. I unintentionally hurt my partner or say something that is overly harsh or is unnecessary. So if you're in a loving, long-term relationship, it's very unlikely that your partner will leave you immediately because of one mistake. So if I have an attitude of, okay, I know I'm going to fail a lot at being the perfect partner, at being my best self, at communicating. One of the things I used to say to one of my partners is human communication is hard. I think all of us think everyone else is communicating beautifully, but somehow we're having trouble with our partner or our kids. But what if you just accepted the fact, even with our best words, even with our best intentions, even with therapy, human communication is hard. What if we just accepted that? So when I say something and someone misunderstands it, I'm not surprised by that. I'm like, yep, human communication is hard. Of course they misunderstood it. Or when I misunderstand something, right? Of course, human communication is difficult. It's hard. And this is why intention is really important. Being honest about intention. If I said something intending to hurt somebody, that's not really going to be good, ever. So I really want to check my own mind and heart and make sure that in a loving relationship with a child or a parent or a partner or a friend, in those relationships, I am coming from a place of wanting to connect, not trying to hurt or harm or push the other person away. So if my intention is aligned, then again, will other people always sense my intention? Will they appreciate it? Will they understand me? No. Again, human communication is hard. Just because we intend well, it does not mean that intention will be understood or received by others, and we just have to accept that fact. So again, going into relating, knowing that when I say something, especially something around a touchy topic, I will probably fail in my first attempt at getting my point across, at being understood, at being accepted. And it's okay. Again, there isn't some couple that isn't experiencing this. So again, a very important concept to grasp here is if I'm not expecting failure, if I don't embrace failure, then I'll be less likely to admit it and to correct it. So again, the best example I think is a loving relationship. Somebody says, hey, you said this and it hurt my feelings. They're emotionally honest with you. When you say this, I feel this. When you ignore my text, I feel unloved. When you dismiss my suggestion for dinner or whatever, I feel undervalued. I don't feel loved, whatever it might be. So they share this with you. If you are open to the idea of failure, mistake, learning from that, then you will likely be very curious with what they're sharing with you. Be like, oh, interesting. I didn't know that. What exactly is going on? What could I have said differently? What could I have done differently? Right? Curiosity, very, very important. I've talked about it before. So you're open. You know that you will fail at being a good partner, and you're open to suggestions. You're open to learning how to be a good partner to this individual, right? Not in general, although sure, you might get better in general, but how can you be a good partner to this individual? What do they need to feel loved, to feel accepted? So you're learning this, but if, let's say, you think you're supposed to be perfect already, or you think failure is bad, what happens mentally? Well, what happens is a block is created, an unwillingness to see that there was, or admit that there was a mistake, that there was a failure. And so usually what happens with most people is they get defensive. So you say, hey, when you said this, it made me feel this. Instead of being like, oh, I'm sorry, what could I have said differently? Or, oh, I didn't realize you felt that way. Why is that? Whatever it is, instead of there being curiosity there, instead of there being an open mind, there is that wasn't my fault. You shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have done that. It's not to say the other person isn't partly responsible for what happened, but what role do we play? What role do we play? In my experience, this is a very important question for someone who's awake to ask. Not what could someone else be doing differently, because we can't control others. We can't control the world. We might have influence over the world, we might have influence over others, but we can't control them. In fact, we don't even really control ourselves. But our sphere of influence tends to be most powerful inside of ourselves. So we can, in theory, imagine, think about anything we want. And then whether or not my body will do what I want it to do is another question. So again, crow pose could be an example of this. I can imagine doing crow pose, but will my body actually do it? I can imagine sprouting wings and flying through the sky, but will it actually happen is another completely different issue, right? Different question. So again, can I control my body? Yes and no, to a degree. Can I make it fly? Nope. Can I make it do crow pose? Maybe, with enough practice, maybe with enough visualization, with the right attitude. Does it matter? I don't think so. I don't think it matters whether you ever do crow pose or any arm balance or any yoga pose for that matter. Does it matter that you try? Yes. So this might seem like a contradiction, but I assure you it is not. It's very important that you try, that you always do your best. With everything you do, I would recommend everything that you do. See if you can start doing your best. If you're already doing it, right? Whatever it is, even if it's something you don't want to do, see if you can give it your all. Now, that doesn't mean push really hard. Sometimes in our culture, people think giving it my all means pushing really hard. No, it's a psychological stance. Do your best. Be willing to try. Be willing to fail. Be willing to make mistakes. Be willing to learn, to refine. Be willing to try again. Be willing to fail again. I don't remember who it was, but I was listening to somebody just the other day, and they said a lot of people think that successful people, the measure of it is like the amount of success that they have. But actually, successful people have had many more failures than average. Again, I'll repeat that. Truly successful people in any field have generally failed at many more things than they've been successful at. So why are they successful? Because they dare to fail. Others are trying to play it safe. Others are so scared of failure that they're unwilling to try. And this brings me to the psychological aspect of it. Most of us are afraid of failure because we don't love ourselves on a very deep level. So the way that we've learned to get love, approval, and appreciation is by being successful. This again harks back to attitudes that are in our education system and are just prevalent in our society currently. I personally feel that these attitudes do a lot of harm to children and ultimately adults, because once the harm has been done as children, very few people do the hard work of undoing that damage. So this is one of the things that I do in my job, is I help people dig up this negative programming from youth and to dissolve it. But most people are unaware of it, and even if they're unaware of it, they are not committed to doing the difficult, unpleasant work of unwinding that programming. And so most of us are going through life seeking others' approval. One of the ways we think we get that approval is by quote unquote success, succeeding. So what most people do is they live very limited, small lives. They find something in school that they appear to be good at. They get good grades. They study that. Then they graduate, they get out, they get a job where, again, they're making enough money, but they may not feel a lot of joy when they're at that job, but it's enough. They're safe. They're comfortable. As I've spoken about before, comfort is a cage. And if we truly want to feel alive in a spiritual sense, we will need to get out of that cage. We will need to grow. We will need to challenge ourselves to do scary things, to fail. Be willing to fail. Look forward to failing, because you will learn valuable lessons from those failures. So again, this talk was inspired by teaching things in yoga classes that many people will fail at. But what I'm hoping to do is reframe what is happening with the failure. The point isn't to succeed. In a sense, the point is to learn to benefit and learn and grow through failure, because this is how life actually happens. If you look at nature and evolution and all these things, it happens through abundance and, again, adaptation and failure. Many species that no longer were as capable, they over time die out. And a species that is better adapted will succeed. This is just how nature is working. And we might see that as, oh, well, shouldn't every species succeed? Shouldn't we bring back all these extinct species? Well, while human beings causing mass extinction is definitely a problem and something we want to get a handle on, The natural order of things is the natural order of things. None of us would be here without it. So being presumptuous and thinking that we know better, that the dinosaurs shouldn't have gone extinct, that XYZ species shouldn't have gone extinct, this is again very presumptuous of us if we think we know. So nature, our own bodies, reality itself appears to embrace failure. Again, part of the backside of this is non-judgment. So again, if I fail, then I suck, I'm no good at anything, what's wrong with me, why do I fail? This is an indication, not that failure is bad, but that you have some conditioning and programming that needs to be looked at. And that is the kind of work that I do with individuals. So this is what we want from yoga and spirituality ultimately. We want to be free of these negative thoughts. We want to be free to fail and to learn and to adapt and to grow. This is what we see happening throughout the universe. Adaptation, evolution, failure, learning from the failure, right? And then sometimes, if there's enough of that process, I would call again a practice of fail, adapt, learn, grow, fail again, keep doing that, you begin to see more and more successes. And so this is where someone who maybe gets up on a stage and plays a musical instrument, or a gymnast, or someone with a high level of achievement, that's where they are. They, at this point, will appear to have many, many, many more successes than failures. But what's hiding behind the success is all the hours, the willingness to fail over and over and over again. All right, everyone, I hope you find this talk helpful. Please reach out if you think that I can help you in any way. And if this was helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving me a comment, even if it's just to say hello. Alternatively, if you'd like to help me, these videos are made possible by people who contribute financially. So you can leave me a tip below, PayPal, Venmo, or you can become a patron on Patreon and help support with a monthly contribution. It really is my patrons who make these talks possible. Until next time, everyone, namaste, and have a beautiful day.